let's talk a little bit about the input and output devices that handle input and output for our computers. Basically, we have a couple of different kinds of devices, keyboards and a mouse and scanners and display printers and speakers. And the major input device is still the keyboard. I thought by now we'd be able to just talk to our computers, but no, we will at some point, but still we have to use the keyboard. And if you're going to use the keyboard, the best and most efficient way of using it is to use what's called touch typing. What's that? Well, if you can close your eyes and you can still use the keyboard to type things, you're touch typing, and it's a real valuable skill to have. Not too hard to learn. There's some software packages that'll make it a little bit easier. Also, there's some free websites that'll help you. But basically, it's a matter of practicing and practicing and practicing, and you'll get it. It's really, really handy. Another input device is the mouse, of course. We've got a couple of buttons on the mouse, and you're pretty familiar with those. The most important one, I think, is the right mouse button, because that always brings up a nice context menu. A context menu is just a menu that changes depending on what kind of situation you're in. And usually the thing you're looking for, not always, but usually is right in that menu. Very, very handy menu. Of course, there's also a scroll wheel on the mouse, which helps you, very valuable for scrolling up and down a big document or a very large web page. Peripherals are any kind of device that are added to a computer, okay? Any kind of device. And we've got printers and scanners and projectors and microphones, such like I'm using right now. And they all connect to computers. We also have power buttons, which turn on in the computer. Cold boot the system, meaning basically just to start the system from a cold start, turning on the system. There's also a warm boot, which is basically just to restart the system. Sometimes your computer gets locked up, and the only way to fix it is to restart it or warm boot it. Okay, now don't get confused. The boot process does not mean kicking the computer. Okay, that does not usually help things. In the classroom situation, instead of shutting down a computer, it's always a better idea just to log off. The computers in most classrooms will just automatically shut off after a certain amount of inactivity. And if you just log off, it makes it easier for the next person to simply log on. If they have to do a cold boot, it'll take them a couple of minutes, and it'll take a long time. So just log off in a classroom situation. Most computers nowadays will go into sleep mode. If you don't do anything with them, they'll go into sleep mode. And some will actually turn off. If they're sleeping for a long enough time, they'll just turn off, which will save battery and save power. You have a lot of peripherals. Of course, the key thing is, how are those peripherals connected to your computer? For years and years, we suffered with these things called serial and parallel connectors. Oh, they were such a pain, okay? But fortunately, they're obsolete, and now we have the USB connector, which is so much easier, okay? You've seen it. It's a simple little rectangular connector, and it's very, very handy. There's also a FireWire connector, which we don't see that much anymore. It's used a lot in video, and there is a newer one called Thunderbolt, which is very popular in the Apple community. It's kind of expensive. We don't see a lot of other devices for other computers yet, but maybe in the future. And there's a wireless connection system called Bluetooth, which we should talk a little bit about. It's kind of a strange name, but it's named for King Harold Bluetooth, and you can wonder how many times he went to the dentist. It's basically just a short-range wireless network, like Wi-Fi, only much shorter. And because it's so short, it's not used too often, but it's used a lot for like speakers and headsets. Very handy. You've probably seen them a lot. You're walking around. The USB is so important. Let's just talk about that a second. It stands for Universal Serial Bus. Of course, bus is anything that transports things in the computer world. A bus is something that transports data. It's used for almost all peripherals, which you kind of get from the name Universal, right? And the newest version of USB is USB 3.0, which is very fast, okay? If you're buying a new device, trying to make sure that it's a USB 3.0 device. It's you can tell because there's a blue plastic strip on the connector. And even if your current computer does not handle USB 3.0, it'll still work with it. But when your next computer, which will be compatible with USB 3.0, will work with your new devices, and you'll be amazed at the difference in speed. They really, really improves the amount of throughput for your various devices. Okay, good. Review. We talked about input and output devices, the keyboard being the major input device still. The best way to use that device is to use touch typing. The mouse is another device, and the key button there is the right mouse button. Any device which is connected to a computer is usually called a peripheral. When we start a computer, it's called cold booting. When we restart it, it's warm booting. It's a good idea in a classroom situation just to log off rather than to turn it off. And the USB connector, Universal Serial Bus Connector, is the most popular and most useful connector right now. Okay, that's it.